welcome to our party. Welcome to our shift party. This is our fam that's here. We are finally launching some Q&As because the gymnastics world desperately needs some help, and I
Yep.
desperately want to help people. Welcome here, everybody. This is our crew. For people who are unfamiliar, people might know me, but they don't know the incredible team that I have behind me that makes me look way better and cooler than I am. So me, obviously, I run the company, and I can be the massive nerd of the group. Sports PT, I'm a strength coach, and I'm a gymnastics coach. And then we have Becky, who is over in my top left corner. Becky can wave. Hello, Becky. Becky is our assistant digital media content producer. She is also a gymnastics coach. She was the first person that joined Shift when I was way too stressed out and could not do everything on my own and needed help. Also, we have Taylor Townsend, who is our marketing and business analytics kind of side of the road. She deals with the numbers. We're like the creative three, like we're like the abstract like thinkers, and then Taylor keeps us on line with like business and numbers. That way we're not steering our ship too far off the road. Another person who I didn't realize I needed until she was actually here helping. So she's also a gymnastics coach, which is super helpful. And then our newest add to the team and the family is Sarah Thurkel, who's here as well. She's going to be our DJ for this whole thing. She's our digital media intern. She's a level 10 gymnast. And also, if you guys have seen the short films on YouTube, which almost went viral because she's so incredible, that is all her handiwork. So A Call for Change and A New Path Forward and the entire documentary series that we have kind of coming is all her handiwork. I'm going to try to answer as many questions as humanly possible. First thing we do want to share, this has been a very popular thing we released this week. And one of the reasons we wanted to button up this Q&A to this recording is because we put together a course for gymnastics coaches who desperately need help to learn all of the newer information. It's very overwhelming. Trying to get ideas from social media about gymnastics coaching right now is like drinking water from a firing hose. There's a million drills and a million different opinions. And so I pretty much took all the most common questions that I get every day, and I put them into 5 modules of flexibility, strength, basics and shaping, injuries and prehab, and culture development. And wildly, we had about 1,500 people sign up in the first couple of days, which blew my mind. And a lot more people have been saying that the information is extremely helpful. So we wanted to put this session alongside the release of the course to get people to kind of have clarity on maybe some of the questions they have, but also a lot of the things I get asked about are in these 5 buckets. So you guys can see the link at the bottom there, which is shiftmovementscience.com/free coaches. If you guys want to sign up, it's completely free. There's no strings attached.
Jan Boutin from Belgium asks, how do you find the right balance with periodization for the group of gymnasts who aren't in competitive or recreational gymnastics, where the demands of their skill level are not that high, and who have 3 to 4 training sessions a week, varying between 2 and 3 hours, assuming they're at the end of their growth spurt?
That is a fantastic question. I'm really glad we're starting with this one because I think sometimes some of the content that we produce, people may think we only really work with or talk to higher level gymnasts or higher level programs or, you know, colleges and elites. And I actually do help a lot of the recreational side and a lot of like kind of, I mean, what the 90% of gymnastics that's not competitive, that's not division, you know, goal oriented, that's not elite oriented. So I still think a lot of the same principles in strength and conditioning apply to the non-competitive and the recreational athletes, especially when it comes terms to longevity and health and trying to make sure like what's the end goal of that side of gymnastics. It is teach them amazing life skills that they can have to become great humans, right? Like that's what we're trying to do. So the best way to not do that is to have them get hurt or to have them burn out because they're not getting skills quick enough, or to have them maybe be frustrated because their parents don't think that they're making progress, right? And so with the ideas related to, so periodization, for those that are not familiar, periodization just means changing the intensity either day to day or week to week to not like redline somebody and burn them out or make them too tired. So in the competitive context, what that means is not doing hard things every single day and having someone who can't recover or get you like a break, right? On the recreational side or the non-competitive side, what that means is changing the types of skills you train and changing the types of workouts you do to be a little bit more on the intent. So say you have, let's go 2 days per week for a 45-minute class, right? Let's just talk about that. They say they have 3 to 4 sessions, but let's say we have like a question or a session or two per week. So, right. So maybe on one of those days would be more oriented on like actual skill training, right? And actual like shaping and actual development and actual repetitions and actual like, here's where you put your hands in your cartwheel, right? It would be much more focused on the nitty gritty development of gymnastics. Whereas the other session, because the first one in the week was maybe a little bit more on the intensity side, the second session you would pull back a little bit more, right? So you wouldn't be doing all the hardcore gymnastics teaching. You'd be doing games. You'd be doing more fun stuff. You'd be doing more, trampoline jumping and kind of the more enjoyable side of the sport when you're younger at that age. And so I think that that's going to be something that you want to make sure you keep in mind is you can't always just like plow straight ahead and do hardcore gymnastics, especially the more times they come per week. The more times you got to think about critically what's going on in your program. So if you have a 3 to 4 times per week, you want to have maybe 1 or 2 days where you have a good amount of strength and conditioning and some other stuff to get them stronger. And maybe 1 or 2 days that you're doing a little bit more of the fun stuff and the more casual stuff. Right. And everybody knows here, that's where, I actually started for 3 years in preschool gymnastics and teaching like younger compulsory levels. So like, I kind of get the grind here, but it's really hard to get buy-in and motivation from young kids if you just do the hard, boring stuff every single day. Like good luck keeping them to have fun in the program if you don't let them jump on the tramp or you don't let them play games or you don't let them just make up their own routines and have fun, right? It's gonna be really hard to keep their attention. And then what's gonna happen is they complain to their parents that it's boring. And then the parents are not gonna be as willing to kind of keep them involved in the program. So periodization in the competitive context means literally going down to the nuts and bolts of sets and reps and routines and hard and peaking and not. If you're not in the competitive side, it means just balancing the more important stuff to go like about gymnastics development to the fun stuff and then the non as structured stuff. And so I think that's the advice I would give to somebody who's more on the recreational side or the non-competitive side is mixing more the hard stuff and the fun stuff. And you can do games, obviously every practice, you can make competitive stuff games too. But I think the overall focus and vibe of the practice, sometimes when it's all like everybody knows how much different the vibe is when you tell the kids we're gonna have an easy day and we're just gonna kind of get some fun. We're gonna try some new skills. We're just gonna relax a little bit. Like the tone is just like, whew, like everybody's a little bit more calm versus when you come in on the competitive side, you're like, all right, warm it up, warm up, 3 routines, let's get it. Like, it's like, oh, this is like a little bit more aggressive. So that's what periodization means on the non-competitive side is balancing, throwing those two things back and forth. And so hopefully that helps. But yeah, I think it's an important conversation to remember that we're not only thinking about competitive gymnastics, high level gymnastics, Division I elite all the time. The 90% of the kids in gymnastics are just everyday, kids who want to have fun and do some stuff and jump in the foam pit and do all that. So
one of the things that I'm seeing is like, as we've talked, so, a lot of the work that we're doing is similar. And I feel like that coaches that I'm interacting with kind of have this block. Like to say that I need to do something in a new way is to say that what I used to do was wrong. They feel a lot of shame and they don't want to feel that shame. And so they're not then willing to step into new ways and new learnings. And so as you approach coaches, as you talk about things like, even as you're talking tonight, like how do you help coaches overcome shame from maybe any past ways that they were coaching in order to really be freed up to move into some of these new ways?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked that question. And that is a tough one. So there's a few layers to it. And anybody who listens to the podcast probably notices this in the way that I approach some of these topics that are hard. And we do this a lot with our staff training as well so number one is at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be happy and everybody just wants to coach and enjoy what they're doing. Right. And I think the first thing that always people jump to is like, you want to give the athletes the best experience. You love that feeling when they're happy. Like, I totally understand that. That's why I still coach. I get that. But in some departments, like you have to recognize that at some point there is a selfishness to this, that in order to be a productive, successful coach, you have to be okay yourself and you have to be happy on your own and you have to love what you're doing. Right. And I listened to a great podcast with the CEO of Whole Foods, and he was saying like, what do people need to be really happy employees? Number one, they need to be financially, rewarded for their hard work. They need to cover the basics of feeling like they're part of something important and they're part of something meaningful and they're part of something that has value, right? So yes, helping the kids, doing that is great, but they also want to be part of a team that they feel like they're heard, that they're listened to. They have a sense of control in their own life to make a difference for themselves and for other people. And I think that is where I suffered so much burnout. And it's also where so many other people suffer burnout is gyms that I've been a part of where it doesn't say it doesn't matter what I say. I don't feel like I'm heard, right? It doesn't matter the problems that I bring to my manager or my boss. it just like goes in one ear and out the other, right? Or I do all this work to try to help somebody and they're just like, yeah, we're not going to do that because that's not what we did, 10 years ago. And so that's always my first step, is trying to understand the psychology of what does this person want out of coaching? What does this person want out of their involvement in gymnastics? And I try to reverse engineer that goal for them to try to help them reach that better. And the most common one that I get from most coaches who, DM me and are upset is like, I just want to feel like what I'm doing is worth it. I want to feel like I'm respected. I want to feel like they listen to me. And so in our own coaching staff, we heard that as well, which is like, we weren't paying them enough for their time. They were overworked and underpaid, straight up. We weren't paying them for their meetings and their travel time and all that. So like, okay, we got to fix that. We weren't listening to everything they had to say in terms of why they think maybe the gym's culture was so jagged and broken. So we like had a big old sit down meeting for 2 hours. We bought them pizza and listened to everybody and said, like, just lay it on us heavy. Like, what do you want us to hear that you feel like we haven't been hearing? And that released the pressure valve of getting some of these issues out. And then we also just tried to make sure that we gave them all the tools that they need to be successful, right? There's nothing more frustrating than having 8 kids in front of you and 4 kids have different problems and you have no idea how to help them. Why can't this kid get his arms over his head? Why is she still falling on beam series? Why is this poor little boy just not able to jump high enough for his vault? Like and if you don't give coaches the tools they need to feel confident and successful in their day-to-day life, they get frustrated. They get super frustrated. And so those are the 3 things that I think are on my mind is, are we covering the basics of finances and time, and you like your job? Do you feel as though you're doing something that's meaningful and has purpose? Do you feel heard? And do you also feel as though you have the tools you need to be successful? And so with those things in mind, I always ask those people, I say like, what do you want out of this, right? What is the ideal version of yourself that you would like yourself to become in this next X amount of years you work with us? Or what's the ideal vision you have for the gym or for your group or for whatever? And it completely shifts the conversation from an offensive, they're on their back heels, they're guarded, they don't want to listen to you, they're being told what to do. It shifts it to a conversation of like, oh my God, this person cares about me, this person listens to me, this person understands my frustrations. And then it becomes they're in control of the change. And so that's approaching every single conversation, whether I'm having a conversation with the director of all 4 of our gyms that are in our association, and we're having some really hard conversations, especially in the last year with COVID, or we're just hiring somebody new and we want to make sure that they're joining our team as something they would love to do. And it's not just like they feel like a cog in a wheel. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of, I guess, the initial response. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? Or
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a different place where I'm not necessarily like an owner of a gym over a lot of coaches, but our specific organization is working with coaches and trying to help them learn how to teach mindset training and mental health training in a whole new way. And the biggest thing that I've come up against is coaches feeling like, so what you're saying that what I've been doing this entire time is completely wrong?
No.
Like, I don't then really want to hear that. And so thinking about like, how do we help coaches go, like, you did the best you could with what you knew at the time. And now here's something potentially new.
I mean, empathy,
which I think you guys have been doing better than anybody that I've seen.
Oh, thank you. I'm flattered by that. Empathy, like radical empathy, right? Like that's a huge point of understanding, and vulnerability as a leader and as someone who's working with somebody else is saying like, I've been through some hard stuff and I get it. And that's why I think the podcast resonates with people, because I'm not afraid to put myself on the ironing board and say like, man, I screwed up so much. And like, this is all the things that I ruined. I hope you can learn from me. But it's wild when a leader or somebody coming from the outside in is willing to resonate and say like, I get it. Yeah, you're in a tough spot and what you've been doing is really hard. Like the person feels validated and they feel like, okay, if this person cares about me, this person understands what my frustrations are, and they're willing to meet me halfway. And I'm not sure if anybody in here saw it, but I did a webinar with Gretchen Kerr for Gymnastics Canada Safe Sport. And this was a big part of the conversation. It was like 500 coaches who were on there. And it was just like, I don't feel heard. I feel like you guys you're like, the safe sport is so disconnected from the trenches of what really happens in gymnastics, right? Like you guys are in your ivory tower and you have all these things going on. And down here, we're doing the work. And all this is not being seen. And so I think that conversation with Gymnastics Canada was very powerful, because people like myself and Gretchen were able to bridge that gap between like, here's what Safe Sport is trying to do. Here's the perception of what is going wrong. And here's the actual application of everyday real life examples of dealing with parents and teenagers who don't want to work out and all this other frustrating stuff. Like I totally get that. So I think the more you can pull yourself away from that and just kind of get down and just be in the trenches with people, I think is really, really important.
So, okay, my question's a little different. It's not about philosophy and everything. I think we at our club have that a great mix already of
Nice.
hard work, fun, motivation, everything.
Yep.
What I want to start kind of looking at is revamping maybe like the conditioning kind of program to help prevent injury a little bit more, help kids through puberty,
Mm-hmm.
Osgood's, like those kinds of things. But I'm a type A and I want it done really well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I want a perfect program to put together. So I don't start because I want it to be perfect. And so my question would be, where would be a good place to start?
Okay. So this is great because we're actually going to do a podcast soon on exactly building a program from scratch. Like me, Nick Ruddick, and Dan Lonsdale, hopefully are going to talk about like, how do you mix the new school, old school together and build a program from scratch? So let's just do it with you. How many days per week do you work out?
They in non-COVID 5 days.
Okay. So 5 days. And the best way to start this is to actually plan a non-competitive season training program. Start trying to build a program for the middle of the season is really hard because you always want to start from the off-season block and then a preseason block and then an in-season block. Does that make sense? So let's frame this up in the context of the off season, the non-competitive season. So you have 5 days per week. How many, off the top of your head, just shoot regular numbers, how many minutes per day do you have to work on conditioning?
30 to 45 ish.
I need a pen. One sec. So 5 days per week. And then what days per week are they?
They have 2 days. It's generally their off days might be Wednesday and Saturday.
Perfect. That's great. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're off. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they're off. And then Sunday?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So what you want to do whenever you're planning a strength conditioning program is you say, okay, I have about 30 to 45 minutes per day. And you want to think about from the start, what are we going to focus on? Is this going to be a gymnastics specific day or is this going to be a general day? Because this is not coming from a place of like, oh, look at these people I work with. But all of the Division I programs I work with, all of the elite programs that here in the US and around the world I work with are now officially on board for hybrid models of strength conditioning, that they're willing to do some general stuff in the weight room and they're willing to do, or just have weights in their gym, whatever. And they're willing to have gymnastics specific days. Okay. So like, that's the first thing to kind of just swallow and process. Like if you're someone who's like the thought of a weight still shakes your boots. You know what I mean? You don't want to do that. Like I promise you a little bit.
I like the weights.
Perfect. I like it. We're having great. So from that position, you look at, okay, of 3 days, from 5 days, one of those days has to be a light day, right? You're going to have one day in the middle of the week where the kids are going to be tired and you want to dip a little bit going back to periodization and you're going to have that be a light day. So for you, you have Monday, Tuesday off, Thursday, Friday off, but you have Saturday, Monday, Tuesday is kind of right in a row. Does that make sense? So I would make Sunday your light day because Monday your light day because Monday is sandwiched in the middle of your biggest 3-day block.
Right.
Does that make sense? So we're going to have Monday will be the light day, which means you have 4 other days that will either be a hard day or a medium day. Does that make sense? So now you have kind of Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and out of those days, I personally always go with the first day is going to be the medium day, and you're going to ramp up into a really hard day, and then they have a day off, right? So for you, looking at the week, I would be putting the medium day on Thursday, and I'd be putting the other medium day probably on, doesn't really matter actually, it's personal preference for staff and stuff, but as long as the one is on the back-to-back day. So that's what I would start with is I have 5 days to work out. Here's my light day. Here's my medium day, and here's my heavy day, right? So I have 2 medium days, 2 heavy days. Out of those, 1 heavy day and 1 medium day is going to be a general day. 1 heavy day and 1 medium day is going to be a gymnastics specific strength day.
General, you mean full body?
So I usually go full body and I usually program for movements, not muscles, right? So on the general side, the movements you're thinking about are squatting, hinging, lunging, pushing and pulling in this department and pushing and pulling in this department. Right. That's like what most general strength conditioning for athletes does. And then on the gymnastics specific side, I have a combination of Nick's Daily Dozen, my own personal things that I like, and then whatever you think is right for your athletes. Right. So handstands, rope climbs, shoulder opening, shoulder closing, elevation, depression, plyos, bouncing, body tension, core stuff, like all that, like very important, essential body weight stuff that you see, that all has to find a place somewhere in the 2 gymnastics days. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in the 2 general days, right, I'm trying to get a squat, a hinge, a push and a pull for the upper body. So like a push up and a pull and then a handstand push up and all that. So I would take all my exercises that I think I can do, that I can teach really well. I'd be like, here's the 7 exercises that I really want to get to on my general days. For me, it's probably like a goblet squat, a single leg weighted hip lift, some sort of walking lunge, or some sort of step up. Those are kind of like my main ones, right? And then maybe a hamstring curl in for the physio ball stuff. And then on the upper body, I'm trying to get some dumbbell presses and some dumbbell rows, and then maybe a half kneeling dumbbell press, and then maybe some sort of band pull down. So that's like a very general program that you can get a lot of strength out of. On the gymnastics side day, I'm trying to get press handstands. I'm trying to get rope climbs. I'm trying to get some sort of plyo or panel mat, depending on where you are in season. I'm trying to get push-ups. I'm trying to get handstand holds. I'm trying to get leg lifts, like all that good stuff. So I would split those up into what 7 exercises on each day do I want to tackle well? And I would drop those into those slots that I have. Is that, are we still jiving?
Yeah.
Cool.
Totally.
So from those days, then you start programming. You think about, okay, how many sets and reps and time do I have to work on? If you're trying to get general strength, 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 is a pretty good baseline accepted idea, right? If you're trying to get gymnastic specific strength, you might have to go on time of plank holds or rope climbs or 2, right? Like 3 sets of 12 rope climbs. Good luck, right? Like 3 rope climbs, legless rope climbs is very much okay, right? In my book.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think about on the gymnastics side, what are the sets and reps that make sense, right? Like I like doing a lot of body tensioning stuff between blocks. So 20 seconds on each side, right? And then you go over to here and do 5 press handstands, and then go over on the bar and do 5 chin-up pullovers. Let's go through that circuit 5 times. Once you guys are on that group, you're over there, you'll switch to the second group, which might be press walks. It might be V-ups. It might be leg lifts. You might just releve walks, right? If it's a guy's gym, they might have ring strength. You might just put a couple different circuits within a 30 to 45 minute window, and that's your heavy day, right? And you kind of work through that on times. If you have younger athletes, set 10 stations up and just clock it and say rotate every 30 seconds, right? Something like that. So I would kind of have that on the general side. And then I would also pretty much throughout all of the week, we always have some sort of side station in an event to try to get some extra little stuff, releve walks or leg lifts or something like that. We also sometimes have some sort of warm up or event conditioning that's part of it. So we're getting our general strength gymnastic strength all throughout the week. And then we're having 2 dedicated blocks for just gymnastic strength, right? And then on the other days, for programming on the general stuff, you would say, okay, let's do a lower body exercise, a core, and an upper body exercise. So maybe we do 5 sets of 8 goblet squats, 2 a box. Maybe we do some sort of plank drag through because it's a very good core exercise for general. And then maybe we just do our bent over dumbbell rows or our feet elevated rows for the upper back, go through that 5 times. And then the next circuit might be a single leg weighted hip lift because we're doing a hinge movement now. We might do some sort of side planking exercise. And then maybe we might put in some sort of opposite motion. So if we did pulls on the first one, we would maybe do dumbbell presses on the second one, right? And that's like 2 triplets, those are called. Those are very easy. You could get the kids moving really well and have all of your movements that you need on those 4 days of general conditioning, right? And so that's what I do is I think about what phase are we in? What's the goal? It's general strength, right? And I think about, okay, what are the sets and reps that I need to make that stimulus? And I kind of pick the movements that the kids know that I can teach, that I have equipment for, that I have space for. And I go about that for the first week. I screw it up royally. We change a bunch of exercises, and then we finally get in a rhythm for about 4 weeks, and we kind of go 4 weeks of continual loading, and then we take a 1 week deload. So that's what I would probably think about is just in review for people is the higher level phase. How many days per week can I do strength? How much time do I have in those sessions? And then of those days, which days are heavy, light, or medium? And then what exercises can I plop into each of those days? And then how can I program sets and reps and volume that matches the things that we want to do? And I usually program and then give them a binder that has the sheet printed out. And so they just mark their weights as they go along. And everyone does it differently. Some people like circuits. Some people have little kids and they want to do like just a checklist, right? Like I'll coach holds a checklist and like, okay, 20 V-ups, okay, 10 push-ups, okay, everybody go hang on the bar, 5, like you can do that too. That's totally fine. I think it's about the most overwhelming, frustrating thing to do is just live by the whiteboard and be like, did we do pull-ups last week? Okay, pull-ups. Did we do push-ups last week? And you're trying to like literally build the plane as you're jumping off the cliff, right? Like you have to spend hours outside of the gym to research and think about what you want to do and why. And then as we move into preseason, we just switch into more power exercises, more like explosive, cardio with sled pushes and more, rebounding stuff, more half bar sets. Like it kind of builds its way up. And then in season, if we do 2 days of general and 2 days of gymnastics in the off season, on the second preseason, we do 3 days of gymnastics stuff and 1 day of general because gymnastics is more important. We do that for 3 months. And then in season, it's all gymnastics. Like we do a little bit of maintenance care, but pretty much from the the month before our first competition to the last competition we peak at, it's all gymnastics conditioning. It's all rope climbs and leg lifts. And so I think that's another thing that people maybe don't understand about how I approach things and consult is we actually do more or less weightlifting and more gymnastics based on the time in the season. So I just talked a lot. Does that make sense?
Oh, I totally. Because I always feel like there's never enough time to get everything in. So where do you add like the little detailed things on the gymnastics day, like for working on the rotator cuff or toe point or like those little.
Yep. The best place to put that's the light day, right? Our light day is our prehab and flexibility and dance day. So the day when we have an extra 45 minutes that I don't want to just sit there and look at each other, right? I want to actually do something. We'll do a 20-minute flexibility complex. We'll do a 20-minute TheraBand flexibility complex. We'll do one station go with our beam coach and do all your flex and stuff. One coach come with me, or one group come with me. We're going to do our shoulder stuff, our hip stuff. One coach go over here with Heather, our other coach, on the space we have here. And you're going to do some of the more nuanced calf work, some of the extra core stuff, some of the extra shaping work, all that kind of stuff. So one option is the light day, which is great. The second option is in a warm-up. We do a little bit of basics and physical prep stuff every warm-up. So core shaping, some handstands, some push-ups, all that kind of stuff. Side stations, every bar circuit, we have some sort of dedicated station, which is give me 3 chin-up pullovers, give me 3 leg compression lifts, or give me some sort of TheraBand drill. And on beam, that might be a calf station. On, floor, that might be some sort of extra dance station for the nitty-gritty fine details in the mirror. So we usually do a light day. We sprinkle it in the warm-up. We sprinkle it inside the stations itself. And then if we still can't find enough time, we'll try to plug in one more half-hour section somewhere in the week to get another dance circuit or another flex circuit or something like that.
And then I'm assuming that on a leg day, you wouldn't do heavy tumbling.
Yep, you got it.
That kind of thing. Okay.
Yep. So, and that's kind of the next question that comes up logically, is somebody probably already asked this or has this, is that when do you do conditioning, in the beginning or the end? And I think it's based on your goals. If your goals are strength is the most important thing in the off season, and in the off season, we're doing a lot of hard strength. We're doing a lot of longer aerobic circuits to try to get their general engine up. We're typically doing some conditioning in the beginning for body weight stuff. We'll do a little bit of plyos in the beginning to kind of get their nervous system going, but I'll save 75 to 80% of the conditioning for the end, because I'm going to crush the kids in a good way. Right. And for anybody who's asking, I do it with them sometimes. So I get the feeling that they're going through, but I don't want to give them jello legs and then ask them to go land somewhere. I don't want to give them noodle arms and ask them to go do shoot overs. Right. So in the off season, we typically put it at the end, but in the preseason, we might start putting more in the front end, because skills are the most important. Right. So we might want to have the energy and stuff to go through that. And that's the priority. So I want to kind of sell out on the skills and the routines and the hard floor tumbling and stuff like that. And then we're done for the day. Let's get these floor routines done. Then we can finish up and go home. So it switches, but I always do really hard plyos. I might do that in the beginning when they're not in season, because that's when you get a lot of fast twitch effort, versus in the in season, I'm trying to put a little bit of that stuff in the beginning, but then the routines, I want all the energy and all the muscle into the routines. I don't want you to have to worry about doing leg strength after. Said we're going to do a video lecture and hopefully build a program from scratch, because a lot of people have your question, especially now in the whirlwind of, okay, I'm ready to hire a strength coach. I'm ready to get some dumbbells involved and stuff and like that, but I have 94 things to do and I don't have enough time. But people like Scott Wilgris and Ellie Black and her coach Dave are a really good example of how they work in this team. So Nick and I and Dan are going to hopefully build a good example of that for people.
Paula so here's her question.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to do some more studying about gymnastics and wants to know if you have any good book recommendations, or if there's any people who have any good information out there for her to study.
Totally. Yeah. So I have a lot of books. I am unfortunately a victim of the bookshelf. I have way too many. I guess there's a couple layers here. So one is, if you just want biomechanics and you want to understand skills better, Championship Gymnastics is one of the best books probably ever written on that, about understanding the actual biomechanics of skills and the actual kind of nuanced pieces of that. There's a couple books that have come out lately that are a little bit more jargony, and they're a little bit more in the trenches, but they're also really great also. So The Advanced Study of Gymnastics by Monmay Gemini was really, really good. It has a lot of great discussions in it and things of that nature. And then we have also a little bit older book, if you're looking more on the sports medicine side, is the Handbook of Gymnastics Sports Medicine, which was written by Dr. Russell, I want to say. But it's kind of 2013. That has a lot of good biomechanical studies and stuff like that. What else do we got? This is not a self-plug, but Dr. Emily Sweeney edited a book that's everything you could possibly want about gymnastic sports medicine. I wrote that book. I wrote a chapter in that book with her on rehab and strength and conditioning. And there's pretty much everything you could possibly want for injuries and rehab and what's going on. We felt as though the medical practices that people were doing were far out of line of what the sport really needs. And so we just kind of did a labor of love and went crazy for all of it. So I wrote all my chapters, and there's amazing physicians in there as well. So that's kind of more on the geekier side of that. I think for the actual technical side, if you want to learn, how do I spot? How do I do this? I don't know if a book is the best spot for that. I think the best place for that is mentorship. I think you have to be willing and able to sacrifice your finances and your time to maybe get an online mastermind group and watch some videos like Nick Ruddick, one of my best buddies. He's just dominating this right now. And he has master classes on every single event with experts from around the world. But yeah, travel, meet with people, we can't now in COVID, but watch lectures online, Zoom with people and ask. I promise if you said, you find some great expert that you love very, very well, like Amy or Nick or someone, you said, hey, I'm willing to pay for, $500 for my staff to get a lesson on all things bar releases, right? Or on the non-competitive side, we want to learn the best way to teach cartwheels and round offs. Can you give us a master class, a private session, and just record it, chop it up for your staff and put it out, right? Back to the idea of giving people what they need and how to meet them where they're at. Ask your staff in a survey, what are the 3 things you need the most help with? And what do you want to learn from? And then from there you say, okay, who can we hire to teach us about this, right? For us, it was nutrition and recovery. That's how I met Josh Eldridge, my buddy. And I was like, we don't know how to do this well. Can you help out, and deliver a good message to the parents and to us? And so he did a virtual, at the time he came live. But we've also had virtual sessions. I've had sprinting coaches come in. I've had strength and conditioning coaches come in. Nick's come over and he's done some stuff with our gym. I have no shame in telling the girls that I coach that I don't know something and I need more help to learn this. So we're going to hire somebody to come teach me how to do it and teach you guys maybe the drills that you need to know. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff in books, but you can't learn everything in books. I think the best educational model is split with academic online stuff and then live mentorship. Here's where you put your hand in a back handspring, and here's how you do this kind of thing, and here's the drill progression for this skill, and let's watch some video in slow-mo and watch your athletes technically do stuff. So hopefully that helps. But I think living in both is good, and there's a huge opportunity right now in COVID to network with people and get Zoom sessions and get Skype sessions and learn things, watch videos, slow-mo, have mastermind groups, watch routines with your coaches and just pick apart stuff about what's good, what's bad, what can we work? Okay, based on the problems we have, we need round off drills, we need blocking drills, we need leg strength. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but you could kind of go through and have a brainstorming session. And I think a lot of people would be happy with that.
Okay, so next up is Yannick has a question. So if you want to hop on video, I'm going to try to unmute you.
Dave, hi everyone. First of all, sorry, English is not my first language, so
all good.
If you don't understand something, ask me, so I try to say it better,
Sure.
I'm from Brazil. I'm former gymnast, and I coach some 9/11 boys. So
cool.
I saw your podcast with Brad from Gymnastics, and it was really great. A lot of good information. So I'd like you to talk a little more about how to make the training fun, because I tend to be very technical because I see how important it is to teach the kids to do the basics perfect before you go ahead and try something more difficult, So, yeah, and it's not fun, it's not the funniest thing. They be like, coach, how are we going to do somersault? And you gotta learn how to walk before you run, that kind of stuff. So how do I make them engage more and make this fun and enjoyable,
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question. And for anyone who didn't listen to Brett's episode, it came out this week. It was one of the best episodes I think we've had come out in a long time, because we dive into the gray areas of coaching and how it's not all, cut and dry. So expanding upon that more, and this is from my practical experience of what I've kind of gone through. I've tried a lot of things and a lot of things haven't worked, but then also I've been lucky to learn from a lot of coaches. I think the one thing that really is the best middle ground between productive progress and fun is going to be asking the kids straight up what their goals are and what they like about gymnastics, right? What do you want out of gymnastics? For some kids, I'm going to be completely honest, post-COVID right now, they want to come in and see their friends and talk to their friends and talk about boys or girls or whatever. They just want to be there and have fun. They need a social outlet, and they could give 2 craps getting new skills. So we have some people in our gym who are like, that's the goal. They want to be able to come into the gym and mess around and have fun. It's cool. That's totally okay, right? For other kids, I still have very passionate goals about getting skills and moving up in skill level and mid-level goals, I would say, about like competing on our high school team or competing with the local club or just competing with us in a virtual meet. And then we have some kids on the other end of the spectrum that are like, nope, still want it. College gymnastics, let's go, let's do it. So it's a really large, funnel there of who you have in your group. And so if you take the time to ask them like, okay, what do you want out of training? It makes it easier to map those small, boring, minute goals to the bigger goals, right? So let's take the left example of, I just want to have fun. I just want to come here 2 days, 3 days a week. And I just want to talk with my friends and enjoy it. And that's it. Cause I can't handle COVID right now. It's just too much, right? I just want to get out of my house and not be on a Zoom session for school. And for those people like, okay, well, the easiest way to not come to the gym and not be able to do fun stuff is to be hurt. Right. That's the easiest way to not have a good time with your friends. And so I know these strength exercises are boring. I know these basics are boring. I know doing all this stuff is not fun, but if you want to be in the group and having a good time and joking and laughing and all that kind of stuff, as soon as you roll your ankle, excuse me, as soon as you roll your ankle, as soon as you hurt your back because you haven't done this in a while, you can't come to gym, right? You're in PT, and this is coming from a physical therapist who doesn't want to see kids in the clinic. Like, it's the easiest way to get away from your goals of having fun is to be hurt or not make progress, right? That's my second thought is the kids like knowing they're making progress. And I'm not saying like they're catching a ginger for the first time. They're not like getting their cross for the first time, right? They just like are seeing very small marginal gains to be like, ooh, wait a minute, that kip kind of felt good, right? Or like, ooh, wait a minute, like I was a little bit lower than last time. That was pretty good. Like that Diam felt a little bit better. I think kids need consistent, meaningful progress to feel like it's worth their time, right? And we all know this as coaches, right? There's nothing more frustrating and gets you burnt out than not seeing any progress at all and being like, I don't know how to help this person, right? And they feel the same way. If they're never seeing progress, they're always frustrated, or you ask things of them that are way over their head for skill level, right? Like that's going to be too frustrating. So something I found that is very good to boost the morale in the gym is to stop making the drills so insanely of a jump, right? Don't make it such a hard drill to go for. Like, raise your hand in this combo if you have drill FOMO. You look on YouTube and you're like, oh, I like that one, right? And then I go to the gym and I like try to do it and nobody can do it, right? And it's like super frustrating. I'm like, this is not going to work, right? So make the drills that are just above their skill level, or just like with a little bit of instruction or a little bit of technical help, they could get it and it could click and it could feel good, right? And that was an error I used to make, is throwing crazy flexibility drills or crazy vaulting drills or bar drills at the kids that were so far beyond what they were ready for that they just got frustrated and they stopped doing the drills. So it's like an art and a science there to figure out like, okay, what do we need here? We need faster arm swing on this back handspring. Like, how can I get that? And it's like, okay, let's do this back handspring drill uphill with a rolly and some TheraBands and this and that and a foam cube. And it's like, whoa, everybody just calm down, right? It's like, let's do an arm swing drill sitting on the ground against the foam mat and swing as hard as you can, right? Like, okay, we got that. How do we move this up to a jump with an arm swing? How do we then move that up to a jump with an arm swing to a handstand and I'll spot you? How do we move that to a jump to an arm swing with a spot and then you can flip the pit? Like little things like that. And I think you can do that with a lot of other things, especially like on parallel bars and high bars, because some of those skills, man, are so hard to get. Like to teach a kid to do a really good peach basket is just a nightmare. Like I'm listening to like Tom Meadows' lectures and like listening to him, and when I'm trying to help people, I'm like, there's a lot of stuff going on here. So just the minimal amount of progress they can make is really, really important as well. And the third thing is the benefit of just structured play. You know what I mean? Like giving them constraints. So being like, all right, we're going to bars for for an hour. Here, the first half hour, got to get routines done. We got to get some stuff done. But then the next half hour, I'm going to let you just do your thing. Let's just try some high bar releases. Let's try a Kovacs timer just to see what's up. You know what I mean? Just let them play. Just let them mess around. Like, let's go to Tramp and do some new drills for a Cody or for like something that would be a Kovacs down the road. And I think sometimes for the majority of the time, we need to be structured for safety in gymnastics because of like progress and safety. But every once in a while, like cut the line in the sand about what they can't do. Like no one's trying to throw a Kovacs today. It's not going to happen. But who wants to try some drills? Who wants to slide the mat and just jump off the bar? Like, ooh, get your heart racing a little bit. So like, I think there's a really big benefit sometimes in to give them structured play around gymnastics, which is really, really important. And then something that I'm still learning how to do well is giving them just time to have fun, man. Just to be a kid and just do the stuff they see the other people. They want to jump on the tramp. They want to swing on the rope. They want to swing on the rings. They want to play, we play categories like every 2 weeks, which is a board game, right? Just because the last 15 minutes of practice after a 4-week cycle, when your legs are dead and you feel tired, 15 minutes of a fun board game is like the heavens open up. You're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of layers there, but just to recap for people. So what are their goals? How do we map to their goals? How do we get consistent, meaningful progress to feel like it's feeling positive, and they go back home to their parents like, oh, I got this, or I made this progress stuff here, and then letting them play with gymnastics stuff, and then just letting them play, just letting them go wild every once in a while. And I think for little boys, especially, knowing where I was at when I was 12, that goes a long way.
Okay, so the next question is going to be Emily M.
So how do you balance with little kids who are really talented, keeping them in the sport for a long time and not progressing them too quickly, while also keeping them interested and feeling like they're learning new things? And you don't want to scare them by teaching them all these new things that they think they want to learn, but you also want to keep them interested in the sport.
This is a very hard question, but a very good question. So I'm glad you asked it. I'm going to preface this by saying that I don't coach elite gymnastics, and I have never put multiple kids on level 10 in national team. So let's take that with a grain of salt. I don't want to stand in an ivory tower in here and tell you that I have done this, but Nick and many other friends of mine, I'm not going to name drop here, but Nick and many other friends of mine have done this, and they agree. So I just want to preface that. So I think this is something that's coming up now more than ever, because if you look at the research on who gets hurt and who gets burnt out and who quits gymnastics at a young age, 10 to 14 is by far and away the biggest drop off. And from someone who spends hours in the medical literature and this kind of stuff, they're lying. It's not true. The stats that are actually out there on how many kids really are hurt and how many kids are really burnt out and how many kids are really quitting is astronomically lower than what's being said is not true. There's way more kids, because who's going to be like in a survey, be like, whose back hurts? Tell me if your back hurts, right? Like who's going to quit because they hate their coach? Anybody? Raise their hand, right? Like who doesn't like gymnastics but wants to just not say anything, right? Like no one's going to admit that stuff. So I think there's a lot more, unfortunately, burnout and injuries than we see. And I think the one reason, oh man, there's an honest elephant in the room answer to this, and then there's the PR answer, and I'm not going to do the PR answer. The real reason is because our sport is built around making kids in puberty go through the most challenging time in the sport, period. Learning new skills on hard surfaces. Let's be a level 10 at age 12. Like that's a great idea when their growth plates are open. Like let's do double backs to hard and see how that feels on your heels, right? So there's a philosophy type to this, which is like the sport needs a massive shift in what we expect coaches to do for young kids, right? Like it's impossible to ask a coach to get a kid to be ready for college level gymnastics at the age of 12 to 14. So like, I think until we have a systemic shift in how we all want to agree that maybe 12 years old isn't the best place to start here to push, it's going to be hard to run uphill. But that being said, if you have lofty goals, you have to train high level skills at a young age. But there is a way to train high level skills that are fun on non-dangerous ways, right? Like trampoline, soft surfaces, spotting, technical development, drills, basics, all that kind of stuff. And I've watched Nick put a group of 5 girls through a ridiculously intelligent Ginger workout when they were 12. And he's like, they're never going to compete at Ginger till they're 14. Not even at all. But like they're bored. They're bored of what they're doing, and they're more talented, and they have goals that are really high level. So I've watched Nick make crazy amounts of great drills for shootovers and all this kind of stuff, and beam series and many other things you could do. There's a way to work all these skills and not compete them, right? There's a way to work these things and have them on the back burner when they're ready, when they're stronger, when they're more powerful, when their growth plates are closed. And I hope this isn't a crowd unpleaser, but there's no research that says that a 12-year-old's at their peak strength, power, cardiovascular development, or mental maturity, right? So we're asking kids to do skills that are requiring all 4 of those things, right? And so that doesn't happen until you're 13, 14, 15, and you get all your puberty, growth hormone, all that kind of stuff. You do good strength conditioning, you master your basics, all that kind of stuff. So all of those skills that are really fun and really flashy, you can train them, right, and learn them technically with all the amazing things that coaches probably in this group are way better at me than saying. But just put them on the back burner and just teach the kid and educate the kid about why you're holding them back. Teach the parent who's like, in the back of your ear about like, why don't we do this double back now? Like, why doesn't Susie do her Yurchenko now? Why doesn't little Johnny do his Tkachev now? And like, well, his shoulders might rip off if he catches one low. So we don't want to do that, right? And so I think there's the aspect of training those things you can, but then realizing that the real reason they're going to succeed is because they can survive those skills, and not only survive their skills, but think about what happens when you add a new release move into someone's bar routine, or when you add a new tumbling pass, like a double back on hard, right? Like it's not just one or two, it's 500 a month. It's 500 to 700 a month, right? And then you have in season, and you have back-to-back weekends, and you have routines during the week, and you have more drills and more side stations. It's like, it's not a slow rise. It's like, right? You go right up. And so like they're flipping a Suk over here, and they're doing a new dismount over here, and their new beam series over here, right? And I see this happen in two categories, which is the hyperextension numbers stack up really fast for they do a Yurchenko, they do a layout step out, they do a, tumbling on floor, they do a pack or a shapash, like all that stuff adds up really quick. And then the athletes that aren't as back bendy, they start to do heavier impacts, right? They do double backs, they do Suks, they do back tucks on beam, and their ankles just fall apart. And so I think this is being published research, but we're working on some studies now that are really showing that the problems we're seeing in the elite and the NCAA level higher up with ankles and Achilles tears, stuff like that, are not because of only things in the NCAA. They're because of things that we're doing from 10 to 14 that put a lot of load on these kids really, really early. So there's the sport level changes. There's the philosophical ideas about how do you educate people and kind of get someone in the mix. And then there's the personal insecurities, right? There's the personal ego parts of it. There's the personal competitive nature that we have to go to a meet and show off this great double pike. And I'm going to be number one victim on the hot plate here, is that I've made some really questionable training decisions because I'm like, damn, this girl's shoot over is really good. Like, woo, look at this double back. Like, we could definitely compete this. And I was part of a team that let that happen. And because we were doing it because we wanted to look cool. We wanted to be like, wow, look at that gym over there with all those cool skills they have, right? Like, wow, look at that little young hotshot. And then younger, dumber Dave would just like the people telling me at the bar after the meet, they're like, wow, she was so awesome. Like, what are you guys doing? That's so cool. It was the praise and the status and the fame and the Facebook photos and the Instagram stuff. And then I grew a little bit older and I was like, boy, am I an idiot. Like, what am I doing here? I'm sacrificing a kid's health and I'm letting them do skills they're not ready for just because I want people to like me on Facebook. Come on. You know what I mean? Like, so that was a huge face palm Facebook moment for me. So I'm not saying that you're in that bucket that I was in, but there's like, the sport has to change a little bit. The gym's philosophy has to value later development in the basics and progressing well. And then you as a human need to be able to swallow that when people are staring at you at a meet and being like, wow, she's just doing a layout. Like, I've seen her do fulls before or stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Because I'm a young coach, there's often that kind of assumption that, oh, does she really know what she's talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Like, is she holding my kid back because she doesn't know how to coach upper level stuff? Or especially because, like, I coach in Canada. So, like, Gym Can, for example, you can go to nationals as a level 9, but only if you're up to 13. So they've already kind of set that precedent that 13-year-olds should be level 9 if they're good. And so do you have any advice on how to combat that kind of ageist ideology?
Like the part of ageist is in like you being viewed as someone who doesn't know anything because you're younger, or the ages of the athletes and the
as in me maybe not being taken seriously because I'm younger, and not just because I'm younger, but because like there's other people who are way more experienced than me who are doing these big things with their athletes. And I tend to agree more with you on maybe we should slow down and if you want to do those big things, do them soft surface, but maybe not compete them on hard surface.
Yeah. Yes. I do have some thoughts here. So one is I tried so hard to convince people who just did not want to be convinced. So I was like trying to, and this is with like national team coaches and with other medical providers who were trying to do this. It was like, I was spending 80% of my time on 5% of the people who were willing to listen. So I really think that's the first thing is like, don't waste your time and your energy and your effort trying to convince somebody who's never going to come around. Right. So that's like a big part of it, which is there's a lot of people probably around you in your gym who are open to the idea of team collaboration and think you have a valuable opinion. Spend more time with them, spend more time on trying to help them and trying to maybe plead your case to them a little bit. Number two, I think is more of a personal thing, is trying to do the right thing for your own self-worth and trying to show through example that you're willing to learn and willing to do something that's different, and just having the stomach to take the criticism, honestly, like just having the spine to stand on and be like, I almost said a swear right there, but I didn't. He's saying, like, whatever, you don't know me. Like, you don't know what I'm doing. You don't know my life. Like, you don't know how I'm treating the kids. Like, and like the reward you get is your own internal self peace of mind knowing that you're doing the right thing, that you're living morally, but also because your kids are happy and they're healthy. And so in the short term, it's that, like, I can't believe, she's trying to say this or do something new, or she's trying to not follow our system, or, she doesn't know what she's talking about. How dare she, blah, blah, blah. And then it always comes back in 2 years down the road when, and I don't want to say another gym, but like maybe that coach has some kids that they're working with and their knees are just falling apart, or they have severs, or their back hurts, or they're burnt out, or you go to a meet and you're just like, "Ooh, I'm glad I'm not in that rotation of coaches." Like, holy moly, some high stress over there. Like you're just like, the vibe is different. And so there's the short-term peace of mind to kind of like, if you can know in your head as a coach that you're doing everything you possibly can within your control to influence a positive outcome, and you're doing the best by the kid, like, intention matters, man. Like, intention with the kids matters. If you're trying to really be a good person and do the right thing and you screw up, you're like, well, at least I was really doing all that I thought I was. It's different than like someone going out of their way to try to really put themselves first. So I've always lived and tried my best to get past that. When I was having some struggles with as a younger coach, was realizing that I had an ego and that I needed to, I'm not saying you, realizing I needed an ego and that I had a lot more to learn. And maybe I didn't know all that I should know, but also too, just being like, I'm doing what I think is morally right and I'm doing the best that I can. And if you want to throw shade from the left corner, or you want to talk smack about me, like in the coaches party, like whatever, man, like I'm good. I really am. Like, I've gone to the days where I valued somebody else's opinion more than my own opinion of myself. You know what I mean? Like, I really have gotten shifted into that way that, like, if me and my two friends next to me that really care about me think we're doing the right thing and they don't think I'm full of crap and they don't think I'm a bad person, then like, I'm good. I'm good with these 5 people who care about me a lot. But if like random person over here, or coach from this gym, or this person online says that I'm full of crap and they don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm a young coach and I should just shut up, then it's like, all right, you don't know me at all. You don't know my kids. You don't know the parents. You don't know anything about me. So
next we have Natasha King.
Building on, I believe, Jenna's question just now about programming your conditioning for over 5 sessions, I believe. So how do you sort of modify that when you're working with gymnasts who aren't as advanced and who are training like maybe say 3 times a week, just because like the timing has shortened so much more and there's less to work with?
Exactly. So 3 times a week. And can you give me a time frame of how many minutes they're working on their conditioning per practice? Because some gyms like will be so busy with events, they only have a half hour. So how much time would you think per day?
Probably around half hour.
Half hour. Okay, cool. So yeah, I think this question is good geared at the non-competitive people, but it's also geared at the compulsory level, younger kind of developmental younger kids, because some of those kids only come 3 days a week too. So the first thing I will say is, the less time you have in the gym, the more time you have to spend outside the gym planning. And I think that's something that's really important, is if you don't really spend a lot of time on what exercises can we do, what equipment do we have, what space do we have? Like, if I plan a bunch of different fancy drills, but all the mats are taken for beam and for vault, it's going to be really hard to do this, right? So I think the more things you do outside the gym to plan and make yourself be good to go, the better. The second piece with this is, I think that always these are best approached in circuits and not structured, what are called supersets or triplets, or, more density type stuff, because typically there's 2 reasons. One is because it's easier flow of traffic to get kids going in a circuit, but also it's very hard to get young kids to understand the ideas of triplets and supersets, like I described with Jenna, or light and heavy days, or intensity. So if you do circuit-based approaches, you can get more exercises in a shorter period of time, and you get the dual benefit of a cardiovascular stimulus, which is just get your heart rate up and get going, but also getting a lot of movement patterns in a short time. So I think for most of these kids that don't have a lot of time in the gym, doing circuits and doing things that are a little bit more instructed for them is going to be great. Jennifer, I love your cat in the background. I just got ADD like crazy. Anyways, so the more you can plan ahead of time, and the more you can put them in circuits, and the more you can make the exercises the lowest barrier to entry for them to be successful, the better. And so here's an example. In the summer with our level 5s or 4s and down, I program the circuits for the coaches and I teach them how to lead it. So what we do is, instead of kind of in Jenna's example, I said, take the upper, the lower, all the movements you want to get and sprinkle them throughout the days, and then plan sets and reps. For the kids in those lower groups, we say like, okay, let's try to get, we're going to do 2 circuits per week, one on a first day and one on the third day. That middle day is going to be that flexibility, that prehab, all that kind of like, all the things you need to get to. But in those 2 days within these circuits, so say I have 30 minutes, we're going to do 10 stations on each one, right? And then we're going to rotate. We're going to do 40 seconds of work, 20 seconds to transition to the next exercise in a little bit of a circuit, right? And so between the 10 exercises on the first day and the 10 exercises on the second day, you want to try to get as much of the exercises from those days I talked about with Jenna in those circuits, right? But you don't want to be so nuanced, right? So you want to be just a little bit more basic with the exercises. So we might have a 10 station circuit, and we might rotate between the upper body, the lower body, and the core around for 10 circuits. So we might do squatting, we might do leg lifts, we might do push-ups, and then we might go back and do some sort of plyo jump. Then we might go do some sort of like side plank, and then we might go do some sort of like opposite rowing exercise with TheraBands, band pull aparts for little kids, right? Or something like that. And we would just go around, then we'll do lunges, and then we'll do an arch up, and then we'll do some sort of gymnastics handstand hold, right? That's 9 stations right there. Last one, active flexibility, whatever the kids need the most. If it's a boys program, make it a ring strength, parallel bars, whatever, dips. So I would have, okay, all those are my 10 stations. And then, okay, what else do I need to get in the other day? I need to get something like cast handstand or a rope climb. So I'll go rope climbs the upper body. I need to get some sort of hamstring exercise. So I'll do a physio ball curl in, right? And I'll put in between 20 exercises on those 2 days. I'll try to get a general program, and I'm thinking off season right now, right? Or non-competitive. They don't really have a season, so it's not a big deal. But I try to just do those 2 circuits for maybe 4 weeks, right? Or 3 weeks if they're really struggling. The first week is just getting all the things sorted out. The second 2 weeks, you'll actually get them a little bit stronger. And then the same kind of thing is you just put them on a timer and you explain the exercise, and you put them around on your clock, and you try to walk around and have active coaching to make sure they're doing it well. But make the exercises super easy, like squats to a little low box, right? Or just doing band pulls, or just doing some hollow holds. Don't even do a V-up. Just do a perfect hollow hold for 40 seconds, right? So I think that's the better way to do it, is the circuit-based approach, because you get more of a dense workout. It's more activity done in a 20-minute circuit. It's easier to follow for little ones. And it's also easier for the coach to look at an overview about what am I getting, what am I not getting, right? And so if you see in the first 3 weeks that like, man, all my kids struggle on kips, they just cannot get their legs to the bar, I might add in 2 days of compression type strength, or maybe 2 in 1 circuit, or I might do something else more in bar conditioning. If all my kids are very, very not stable on beam and they're wobbling all over the place, I might do 1 releve station in each of those circuits to make that the thing they focus on. Like there's a little bit of nuance in the details here, but programming like that in circuits with the idea of like upper, lower, and core, thinking movements, not muscles, and then maybe some extra work here and there for fine details. I've personally found that is the only way to realistically get the scientific geeky research into the real world with 13 kids that are running around and one pulling one's hair out and they have no idea where their like socks are, right? Like the reality of working with young kids is just like herding cats sometimes. Like, Jesus, just get around here. You know what I mean? It's tough. Natasha, does that answer your question, or do you have more to that?
Oh yeah, definitely. That's really comprehensive. Yeah, but thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I'm happy to help. Yeah, and we do that even for the optional side, like the advanced kids that we kind of work with or consult with. We still have 5 days of strength, 1 day is light, 2 days of general, 2 days of gymnastics specific, and there's 2 cardio circuits that are in there for 20 minutes. So even in the higher levels, we do very different intention behind why we're doing cardio, but it's still in their programming as well to get their energy systems developed for the preseason and the in-season when they're going to be doing like really hard 90-second exercises for floor and stuff. There's a whole different bag of worms on why conditioning like that than the other one, but we won't get into it.
Next up, we have Jennifer S.
My question is just about bridges and when they're supposed to be taught. I just recently read that they shouldn't be doing them until age 5, and I had no idea. And so also, if that's true, what do you do with the kids, who are 3 and can do them already and, want to build and move on from there?
Yes. Okay. So great question. I'm going to start this one by saying that I'm kind of a man of science. And so I always try to follow the literature and the science behind why we make decisions. And there's no research at all, I guess, pro or against that cutoff of 5. And I mean, maybe there is, and I'm just missing it. I've seen some presentations where people say 5 years old, and maybe I'm just like in the dark and I'm completely an idiot, but I don't think there's any clear science for or against 5 years old. And so the next layer of evidence you go to is experience, and you just go to anecdote and stuff like that. And you kind of base other research. How does that apply to us? And so that being said, I think that the concept of 5 is a really good starting point where there's going to be some wiggle room. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be some superheroes that are ready to go at 3, 4. Like you said, there's going to be some kids that just ride the struggle bus. They unfortunately pick the wrong parents, right? And like that bridge might never come in that younger age group. So I think for me, it's about, I like 5. I actually do like 4 and 5 in that window as a way, because of the really geeky stuff we do know about how big a kid's head is and how little their arms are, and not even the physical aspect of strength of how much it takes to do a bridge well, because there's a difference between doing a bridge and then doing a real bridge, right? Like a bridge where you know how to push through your shoulders and know how to use your hips and you're not just bending like a house in half. So I think that there's the aspect of sometimes we're trying to protect young kids from themselves because they're just trying to show off how cool their bridge is and they're cranking on their lower back. And so I think that when you let kids do bridges, I like the thought process of a little bit later in 5 years because of the cognitive development and because of the ratios of their arms and their legs of what they can use to help deload their back and kind of spread the bend out. So I like 5. I think the reason people do that is, again, the head to arm ratio and the strength to body ratio that they have. Like the levers are much more funky when you're 3, 4 because of your, you ever see a 3-year-old walk? Like they go wherever their head goes. It's just like, it's like wherever they flop, they fall. So I think that like, that's what the idea is like they can't maturity wise get with how to do a proper bridge, but also their arms don't maybe have the strength to do it. And the risk of them just kind of like, I mean, I'm not proud of this, but like you turn your back for 1 second in a preschool class when I was younger. And I'm like I turn around and poor Sarah's like, look what I can do without my hands. Right. And like, oh my God, Sarah, like put your hands down. Right. So like, those little kids are just like on their own world sometimes. And the risk of them hurting their neck, maybe when they're, you can't supervise their weight when they're just like, on their own, doing their own thing. I think that is why. I think it's really about that. So I hope that answers the first part of the question. The second part about how do you know when to actually do that is that that's when they become strong enough and cognitively aware to do the things that you're asking of them from a technical point of view, right? So like, do they know how to push through their shoulders? Do they know where to put their pizza hands? Do they know how to push through their heels and use their hip muscles to open and not just kind of flop into their back? And usually that's when you're doing all of the things that we know about, like elevating their feet or wall walks down a bridge or spotting them and just pulling off for a second or two and seeing if they can hold themselves a little bit, or a barrel roll and they can get their hands to pressure, right? If a kid does a barrel roll to their head and can't, as soon as you let go of their hand in a spot, they just kind of flop into a wet noodle. And then also they can't do a bridge walk down the wall. And they also have no idea what's happening when their feet are elevated. Like, I don't care if they're 14, I'm nervous about them doing a bridge, right? But if a kid is like kind of in that 4 to 5 age group and they start to see that, they can actually press up against their hands. And like, if I take my hands away, they understand body tension a little bit. I'm not going to just be like, oh, well, you're actually 4 years and 11 months. So we're not doing a bridge for another month, right? Like there's a little bit more of a wiggle room there. But I try my best to teach people that 5 is good. And I teach the parents that because I want them to kind of understand the risk of letting them go earlier is very high in terms of a risk to reward ratio. And is it like in the long term of them getting their highest level goal in gymnastics, is it going to matter a ton if they do a 4-year-old bridge versus a 5-year-old bridge? Like what's the gain of a perfect bridge when you're 4 versus 5? Like maybe you could argue from high level coaches, maybe Nick has a different opinion, that like the world opens and they have so much more potential because they can do a bridge at a young age. But I don't know if I have enough evidence to go against the risks of what might happen if something goes rogue. So does that help? Does that answer?
Yeah, it does.
Good. Great. Yeah, until other evidence comes out against why 5 is there, then I'm probably going to keep riding with what we know and what we have.
Okay, next up is Caitlin Bradley.
I just had a question about, I have a lot of beginner rec classes that I coach.
Yep.
And sometimes I don't know how to break down teaching a cartwheel any more than I have, So just wondering about that.
Yeah. So this is challenging. Make sure that you're not judging yourself too hard because you can't control kids. Let's just be real about that, right? Like you could have the best lesson plan and all the perfect drills and do the exactly right teaching cues. And some kid just likes doing a cartwheel with his legs going everywhere, right? There's some give and take here. Like you're not going to be able to help everybody. So, but that being said, there's a couple reasons, a couple things that I really have found helpful. One is the model of, partnering people up with little kids and trying to mirror each other. If you have one kid that is dominating a cartwheel, right, and knows like a T position like crazy, you just put them in little groups. You don't say like, poor Sally, you need some work, so we're going to put you with Jenna because she's great. It's more just like, let's partner up and show off our cartwheels or our handstands. We used to do that a lot in the younger levels, and kids just watch the other kid and they learn a little bit from watching back and forth. And it's not like you're singling anybody out. You just pair them all up in a group 8 and say, like, hey, let's take turns going back and forth and like, see if you can mimic your partner or something like that. The other thing that I has found is really helpful is trying to do, I don't know how to phrase this a little bit, but not doing show and tell, but just doing a little bit of that like round robin display of like, let's go one at a time. And like, what do you think about this one? What do you think about this one? Like, oh, Susie, I love the way that you did this. If you constantly praise you can praise the technical things that are going well on kids and still praise the effort on the kids that are challenging. You know what I mean? So like you go around in a circle and there's one superstar in your group who has like the best cartwheel you've ever seen in your entire life, right? And like you pick out like, wow, I love how your ears are covered in that one, right? And the next one goes, flops over like a fish, but like, wow, I love your kick on that one. So the girl still feels, or the guy still feels as though they're like getting encouragement and they're making progress, but everyone's watching the technical piece of what little Susie is doing really well that makes her have a great cartwheel. So I think those two things are good. And on the drill side, I think that trying to sometimes set up the mats in a way where they have to do what you're asking, right? There's no way to get around this rainbow block without kicking on top of it at least, or over it at least. So I think sometimes I made an error as a preschool and younger coach to just kind of open structure, but like, here's a carpet square, work on your cartwheel, right? And I'll fix you and cue you. But if you set blocks up that are soft and that are not going to obviously get them hurt, they have to do what you're asking well. And this is called constraints based, teaching, but you just set like, that's what we do with round offs, right? Like, and all the girls like go through this tunnel and they're like, I'm definitely going through that tunnel. Like I do not want to hit the side. So we do that with round offs and stuff in the older levels, but you can do that with many other things in the younger levels related to where you put blocks so they can keep their feet up, or like putting carpet squares down so they have to put their hands on these two spots, right? Or something like that. Try to brainstorm some ideas of where you can maybe build a drill that is not doing it for them, but it's forcing them to use the right-ish kind of proper technique. So 3 things there that I hope are helpful.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you.
Good. I'm digging way back in my, like, I was like 16 when I started doing preschool classes and learning that kind of stuff. But I actually had great mentorship around the lower levels in compulsory and preschool and stuff. So that was how I started the first 5 years before I started getting in the higher level. So I have some cool stuff to offer there.
Yeah, I feel like there's not a lot of information around like real low level recreational gymnastics drills and things like that.
Totally. And I've heard that feedback very openly for the podcast. And so I'm on the pathway of trying to find some people who can come on the podcast and talk about the non-competitive, the lower level, the recreation and stuff like that. I just haven't found, unfortunately, I don't know someone who is comfortable on camera to go all that. So I've tried my best, but we're getting there. We're getting there for sure.
Next up is Jenna. She has another question.
Traditionally, I think most people do their cardio warm up and then they do a full on stretch of oversplits and everything. Mm-hmm. But I have heard, though I'm expecting the research is backed by you, that flexibility decreases strength. So, and maybe that's not exactly true. I've just been little bits and pieces. So sometimes now I'm thinking, do we save the major stretch till the end? Like obviously you've got to do a definite basic stretch at the beginning because your straddle jumps, your switch splits, like all of your active flex has got to be warmed up so that there's no injury. But just wondering what your opinion is on whether or not flexibility reduces strength, like for your conditioning and stuff.
Yeah, I'm very happy you asked that question. I get that one a lot. And so this is a situation where you have to be careful. I'm not saying you specifically, I'm saying the world at large has to be really careful with either headline reading research studies or just abstract reading of studies or cherry picking studies. And so I think in the strength conditioning world, this all came like 5 or so years ago. And the studies that most of these things came from is they would have somebody come in, they would do a static stretch, and then they would warm up and try to do a 1 to 5 repetition max back squat. And they would measure the declines in performance between groups. So they'd have one group that would just do static stretching. They would have one group that would do a static stretching plus a dynamic warm up. They would have one that would do their traditional warm up. And they found in those studies, if you literally go from static stretching to back squatting heavy, you have a reduction in power and a reduction in strength, right? Because you look physiologically about what stretching does. Stretching, heartbreak hotel for everyone, stretching does not increase the length of your muscles over time, right? Stretching reduces the discomfort threshold associated with stretching. So it desensitizes your muscles over time to tolerate a stretch more. And there's wild studies where they put somebody in hamstring stretching machines and they stretch them like 5 days a week for 5 minutes. And they look at the length of muscles. And then they also look at how far their leg goes. Their leg goes more, but the muscles don't actually get longer, right? It's like, what the hell is going on there, right? And what's happening is that there's nerves in your muscles that go, ooh, this doesn't feel good. And it pulls you back from stretching more. And over time, as you stretch chronically, it desensitizes those nerves, right? So when you warm up, Yeah, you do. Yeah. So, and this is on the other side of the fence of what actually increases muscle length is actually the thing that gymnastics fears the most, which is weightlifting, right? Like proper eccentric training has significant research behind it to actually increase the length of muscles through what's called sarcomere. So ignore that if you're not a nerd. But stretching the muscle actually causes to get longer over time, which is why like slow weighted single leg deadlifts or slow chin up lowers actually does increase over time. So what does stretching, what does foam rolling do? And I promise I'll get back to your question, is foam rolling and stretching helps relax the muscle in a short term, but it also increases blood flow to the area. It also increases the water content within muscle, and it also helps the nervous system ramp down. So there's like the adrenaline side, then there's like the rest and digest side. You might have heard of that, fight or flight. So the reason why those studies are helpful is because it shows us that stretching and kind of that stuff does relax you and get you into a deeper stretch. But if you go from first gear to fifth gear, of course you're going to have less power, right? So there's been follow-up studies that show that when you do stretching or some sort of foam rolling, and then you go through a normal dynamic warm-up, the power gains are marginal, if best. Like it's no reduction in power if you do a proper warm-up after you do your normal stretching and stuff like that. So I think with that in mind, you have to think about what the goal of your flexibility session is, right? There's two or three different goals of flexibility. Warm-ups are not supposed to increase flexibility and range of motion. Warm-ups are supposed to prep the available range of motion you have to then go train and do your workout, okay? There are dedicated times when you should be looking to increase your flexibility, which is flexibility circuits. Those are active flex circuits. Those are like all the TheraBand stuff, all the circuits that I put out. Those are specifically designed around all the things in research that actually helps you gain motion, put in a proper order to increase range of motion, right? So then you have maybe on the other side is the goal of flexibility being to just ramp your body back down after a really hard workout, right? Anybody who's gyms here knows super hard leg strength, hard workout, immediately go sit in the car and drive home for 30 minutes, feels terrible. And you feel like crap the next day. So there's the goal of warm up and prep the available range of motion you have in a warm up. There's the goal of gain more flexibility. And there's the gain of trying to accelerate the recovery process for the next day, the next workout. So that's when maybe the end of the sessions like static stability or static stretching or some cool down stretching or foam rolling is really aimed at helping promote you to keep blood flow going and not just like you don't want to go from first gear to fifth gear. You don't want to go from fifth gear to first gear. So you're trying to kind of have three different buckets of why you're doing flexibility. And so, yeah, I guess in summary is that stretching consistently and the research that is really available on this is that all types of stretching does work if you do it consistently. So consistency is way more important than intensity, right? Like what you do every single day is more important than what you do one time per week in a flexibility session. And so I think the research was 2 sets of 30 seconds on a muscle group, 5 days, 6 days per week is what significantly increased range of motion the most. So a combination of static stretching or PNF stretching or some other stuff that we do. So if you're looking to actually increase range of motion, you want to do some consistent work every single day. But think about in your program, what is the goal, right? So we might do foam rolling and some light stretching before we do our full dynamic warm up with kicks and all that kind of stuff. And then we go to our event and do our warm up for basics. And then we might have a separate time in the week, which is just for flexibility of the shoulders or hips. And then we might do a really hard leg circuit, at the end of a practice and have like, hey, 5-10 minutes real quick. Let's circle up, just do a quick stretch because your legs are kind of toast right now. And I don't want you to go sit in the car and then go to bed and wake up tomorrow and be, super, super sore.
Next, Kelly, did you want to ask your question or did you want me to read it?
I have a 9-year-old who just joined my team from a USA team. I coach IGC. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that program, but
I coach YMCA. I'm right there with you.
Oh, so she came from a USA team, and she came with a lot of skills, which is great. But now all of a sudden she won't back handspring. And I had a kid last year who just randomly stopped as well. But thankfully she worked through it pretty quickly. But this one kind of won't even try to do it. She just kind of stares at me and says, I'm scared, but we'll back walk over. She'll back limber. She'll do back tucks off the beam. So I just don't know where I should go with her, if I should just kind of push it to the side and not really work on them right now with her and come up with some different tumbling ideas or any ideas on how to kind of push through really the mental block of that random, just, I'm not going to do it one day.
Yeah. And I completely understand your frustration because post-COVID, we had a lot of delayed spotting. And so we couldn't really do some of the stuff. And we had a lot of kids who got scared to go backwards, scared to do flyaways, scared to do giants. So I feel your pain. And this is, again, my answer is a compilation of all the people that I have learned from and met. So I don't want to take credit for all this, but there's a couple of things that I have found that actually work really well. So number one is talking to the kid about why they have the fear, right? And so I don't mean why they have the fear like generally or just like, oh, I'm just scared. I mean, like like really asking like, what are you most scared of? And like for most kids going backwards, I'm scared of crashing on my head. And I would be really scared too of that actually. So I understand your frustration and your nerves. But you have to break down technically why those things happen. Like, well, okay, let's think about why we land on our head. What would we have to do to maybe not have the best back handspring? And they go, well, I probably wouldn't have to, my arms wouldn't be up. And you're like, oh, that's very good. What else? You're like, oh, well, I wouldn't jump. Yep. If I didn't jump enough, I would maybe under rotate a little bit. And on flyaways, the one I always say is like, why do you pull into the bar? Do you understand why you pull into the bar? They go, I don't know. My feet hit the bar. And you go, okay, well, think about, can you pull into the bar if your ears are covered? Like, well, yeah, like definitely it's hard to, but you know, it'd be really tough to do it, but it could happen. Right. But what else? What makes you get away from the bar? They go, when I tap. Okay. So if we keep our ears covered and we tap really hard, we're going to probably get away from the bar. And then I think about, okay, now where would we tap? Do I have to tap on the front of the bar, under the bar, back of the bar, where they go, oh, if I tap back here, it slingshots me forward. If I tap at the bottom, it makes me go up like a giant. If I tap on this side, it sends me over like a giant. So like on the flyaway example, it's like, okay, so the ears got to be covered. I have to actually tap and I have to tap early, right? On a back handspring, it's like, okay, I have to cover my ears fast with an arm swing. I have to actually jump. And then I got to really focus on squeezing my elbows straight. I think those three things maybe would make me not have a great experience with a back handspring or a back walkover or something like that, right? And then lastly is like, what do you look at? Right? Like if you don't look anywhere, it's just like, whoa, that happened so fast. So on flyaways, it's like when you're falling in the back, do you see your toes? Do you see the low bar? Right? Okay. When you arch, do you see your toes? No, they go away. And then I got to find them right away. When I kick my toes, do I see my toes again? Yes. And I see them where? Up here or up down there? No, I want to see them out at 45 degrees up at the vent, right? We have vents in our gym. And then on the back handspring, I go, okay, when you stand and you look on the beam, what do you see? Like, okay, I see my feet and I see the beam. And I said, okay, do you see the beam behind you? No, just yet. Right. And then, okay, I got to swing my arms and feel this, but I have to find the beam as quick as I can with my ears covered to know I'm on the beam, right? And to know my hands are going on the beam. So kind of breaking those things down and being like, why are you scared? What's going to cause you to do the thing that you're scared of? And here are the technical things that you can do to make a change on that. That's how I build my drills. And I think sometimes building a drill ladder, you start with you go all the way backwards and start with the thing they're comfortable on doing that they can do successfully. And you make that the start of your ladder or the start of your kind of hopscotch grid. And so for back walkovers on the high beam, that's terrifying for a young athlete. We're going to do back walkovers over a barrel on a chalk line on the ground. So I can really go slowly through these steps and understand what's happening, right? For some kids on flyaways that are so scared, we go back to just tap swings to an arm cradle or a shoulder stand with me. And I drop them on a big fluffy mat, right? And we go through those points of see your toes here, cover your ears, tap, see your feet again, stop, do you see your feet? And then go, right? If you have kids that are, height mismatches and you're not like, able to spot well, you just do it on their own and you just try to see those things over and over again. And you do as many as you possibly can and as many as you need to do to make them feel successful in that step. And then you say, okay, what's the next step that we can do that starts to progress things a little bit, but isn't as scary for you? We take the barrel away on the line and we do the exact same thing. And we try to make those technical steps go well. We do the exact same thing on the flyway, but now we go into the loose pit or we go on the high bar versus the low bar, right? And you do that for as long as you need to until they're successful at that step. And sometimes this takes like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Like I've had some kids that literally had 7 weeks to go back through a basic flyway. These kids were doing double back timers before COVID and they're terrified of doing a single tuck flyway. So it takes time, Kelly. You just got to like give it some room to breathe, but you just keep working your way up the skill ladder. Maybe give it like 6 weeks or 8 weeks. And you say like, we're going to try every week. We're going to do 5 of the progression that we did last week. And then we're going to do 3 of the next progression. And then the next week, we're going to start with going 2 on the first progression and 3 on the next one. And then we're going to add 1 more progression. And then once you get to the 3rd week, we're not going to do the first progression. We're going to start with 5 on 2 and then do 3 on 3. And then the next week, we're going to do 2 on 2 and 3 on 3. And we're going to add 1 more. And you're going to start to work your way up the ladder. And so hopefully, you can get all the way through in an ideal situation where they go from the barrel with a spot, slow motion, and you carrying them over to, a low beam with no mats or a low beam with some extra support. And you just slowly work your way up. And then I usually give it like 6 weeks to 8 weeks. And if they're really terrified of the drills, they're really terrified of the lower level stuff and it's just not happening, then we start having a conversation about what else could we do? Is there, in a non-competitive side, is there something else we could do? Or is there somewhere we can find success for your requirements elsewhere? And like, we've had some kids that have crashed really hard on like beam series and they just switch to a forward series. Like, it's just their back hurts all the time when they try to do it, or they just can't tolerate the fear and it's too much. And we said, hey, you know what? There's a lot of pictures in this book that we can get your stuff for. You know what I mean? So like, don't sweat it. There's a lot of ways to go about gymnastics the right way. If it's a compulsory level where they have to do that skill, you got to try your best to just keep, hammering away at those progressions and those basics and stuff like that. And then also getting other people involved, right? Try another coach, try a sports psych, try their parents, try to talk more. If they are completely not having it at that level and it never ever is going to come back, you start to have some bigger conversations about like, what do you want here? Like, do you just want to have fun and do this thing? Or do you really care this much about this level? And is there some other way we can make you have fun in the gym and not be so freaking worried about this one skill when the rest of your 3 events are fine? Like, I've had some kids who just compete 3 events, you know what I mean? Because it's like, they just do not want to go, or they just take a friggin' 6 on beam every time. They do a beautiful routine. They walk through their back walk over and they're like, and that's it. It is what it is. Right. And again, that comes back to a self-judgment thing. It's like, if you don't care about what all the coaches say and that judge giving you a very sharp pen deduction, like, whatever, this kid's happy and they love gymnastics, so screw you. Just kidding.
Okay, next up is Isabella Price.
I was asking about Severs. So I coach in Australia, like level 4. They're about 8-9 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had about 4 of my 8 kids have heel pain and Severs sort of related things. Some of them have been to physios and had it diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also a physio student, so I know a bit about it. But I'm just not sure what I can do, like in the gym, to help prevent it, but also with the ones who already have it to kind of do extra exercises to help it resolve quicker. Or I don't know if it's just something that you have to kind of get through because it's a growth plate issue. And they're definitely not like very high level. Like, we don't really do any hard tumbling. Like, they can do a round. That's about it. And maybe vaulting and some plyos are the main sort of bounding stuff that they complain of. But yeah, I just don't know how to get there.
It's something we all face. And so I'm glad you asked it. One, I love your paintings behind you. Those are really nice. So I think there's a couple things here. Some things are out of your control. Some things are in your control that you can modify. So definitely far and away is the obvious answer we all know is that Severs happens. For those who are not familiar with Severs, it's the heel plate or the growth plate in your heel becomes irritated and inflamed because of the landing forces. The landing forces in gymnastics are 12 to 15 times body weight on a variety of surfaces, and they're proportionate to the athlete's weight, right? So even if you have a younger kid who is a little bit not as tall, they still experience the same proportion of forces that somebody else older might. So one is definitely, we already covered this before and you may not have been here, but like the systems of gymnastics, sometimes, maybe these skills are aggressive when they're young, but it doesn't sound like that's your situation. But the time aspect is part of it. Another thing that is very, very important is trying to use more drills to actual tumbling ratios. And I know it's very hard for kids that are sometimes really excited to do their biggest skills and do that kind of stuff, but it's about finding ways that you can continue to develop those skills and make progress towards their goals without maybe, causing the heels to pop up. Because I'll just be honest, if a kid comes in with a Sever's diagnosis and that's really flared up, the first thing I'm telling them is it's going to be about 6 weeks. We're going to have 2 weeks of almost no impact, 2 weeks of very soft surfaces, and then 2 weeks of semi-soft surfaces, and then 2 weeks of hard surfaces. So I'm already framing the conversation about this is an 8-week thing that we're going to deal with, right? And so I think that's important. Is sometimes coaches, not you, because you sound lovely, will just brush this under the rug and be like, just work through it. And, until it goes away, there's nothing we can do. So we're just going to keep training on it until it goes, until it gets better. And if I could tell you how many kids I've treated for heel stress fractures because of that conversation came first and that we're in a boot for 6 months, or in PT in a boot for 6 months, it'd be staggering. But I usually frame the conversation of this is going to take 6 to 8 weeks for these things to calm down. So those are like the bigger picture things, but there are some things that can be done. So obviously everyone knows is that calf flexibility is super important, right? And I think this is a situation where I'm learning now maybe about what to do differently. Is a lot of the calf issues that I used to treat with just a lot of stretching and a lot of like aggressive kind of like overwork stretching are no longer my go-to things. I'm more about the load modification, and I'm also more about kind of getting the strength aspect. So we'll do some soft tissue work, we'll do some calf work, we'll do some different aspects of the massage, which are cool, bottom of the foot. But I'm kind of keeping those kids away from a lot of hardcore stretching, which I think is like the norm. So stretching off a step every single night as much as you can. Light stretching is okay, but I think that really consistent in a lot of a lot of stretching is going to be maybe counterproductive because it puts a lot of pressure and tension on the growth plate. So I would do a little bit of addition by subtraction in terms of the impact load, but also the volume and intensity of their stretching, and see if maybe that changes anything. And then with the physio, obviously you're in this department, but as soon as their pain is manageable, like strengthening is the only thing I found that makes a long-term difference. And I think so many people in gymnastics are just hammering releve stuff. So straight knees, toe point and stuff like that. But the calf muscle, 60% of running strength comes from the other muscle, the soleus, which you're probably aware of, but many people are not maybe familiar with it. But the only thing that comes about in terms of long-term changes is direct strengthening to the soleus, because that is probably maybe more where they're taking a beating. So we do a lot of seated calf raises with these athletes. We sit down, put them on a plate, and we have them do eccentric tempo calf raises, pending that the bone is not painful. And then we also do a lot of, we still do a lot of standing calf raises, standing single leg calf raises, but we do a lot of releve walks with a bent knee. So crouch down to 45 degrees and walk on your tiptoes to get the endurance muscle of the soleus to build up. And we also do a ton of strengthening for the front of the shin and the outside of the shin that I think is oftentimes not done well in gymnastics. And if it is done, it's not done to the same strength and magnitude as the calf, right? Think about how many things we do for the calves in gymnastics. And then every once in a while, we'll do some shin lifts off a board that are your body weight and they're not really hard strengthening, right? So we'll have kids wrap a band around a really hard TheraBand around a rig and do really aggressive set rep ranges that mimic hypertrophy of the shin. So 3 to 4 sets of 8 to 12 with a band that like my shins are on fire when I'm done with this, right? In a good way. Same thing with everters. We put a heavy band and do really, really aggressive ER strengthening of the tibia. And that also is something that needs to be done. So I think there's a little bit of strength and balance issue. And then there's also a little bit of a just like, volume issue in terms of how much we're doing for the calf versus how much we're doing for maybe the shins. So that would be my next recommendation, is doing a little bit of direct calf strengthening. And then I think the last thing is always is proper landing technique. And this is still something we're working through in the gymnastics world, but you will ask kids with severs and with knee pain to come in and ask them to land properly. And they just land upright, all in their knees, all in their ankles. And we know that it puts enormous force on the growth plates. So teaching the kids to bound properly for gymnastics technique, but then land in a squat based position is going to be much more beneficial. So hopefully in that list, there is something in there that is valuable to you aside from time and patience, because I know that is an annoying, frustrating answer.
Next up is Emily T.
My question is how you implement like individualizing plans within a group. So like say you have a group of 8 and some of them can't get their arms overhead, but others can. Would you have a circuit where everyone does lat stretch, or would you individualize that to each person? And same for strengthening, like if somebody is a lot stronger than somebody else in the group, how do you word it so that everyone's being challenged within the group instead of just telling everyone to do like 10 reps or whatever?
Yeah, fantastic question. I'm very glad you asked this. So a couple layers of things to kind of help out with this. Number one is with everything that I do, flexibility, strength, cardio, whatever else it is, I always in my head have 2 options of forks that I'm going to put the groups together in. So, and it's not like a judgment thing. It's not like, oh, you don't have this or you don't have that. It's just that like people have different strengths and people have different weaknesses, right? And I always like tell them like some kids are going to naturally be really good over here on the power department, but not on the flexibility department. Some kids are born with really good flexibility and really good lines, but they're just, they couldn't do a pull-up to save their life, right? I don't tell them that, but in my head, I'm thinking that. So when we do prehab circuits or when we do flexibility circuits or when we do strength circuits, I'm kind of already telling like, all right, this group, you guys kind of work on this a little bit as a group because you're not the most flexible here. We're going to improve that. You guys, you need to kind of work on your shoulder strength more so. So I'm going to separate you and have like the one group that's going to do like a lot of soft tissue work, a lot of stretching, a lot of active flexibility, a lot of eccentrics. They're going to kind of go on one board. And then I'm going to have the other group is going to be like, all right, you guys are really great with your flexibility and you need to kind of like work on the cuff exercises, the strength, the active flexibility. That's a little bit harder for you, some more loaded movements and some drills. Right. And so like, I frame those both in terms of what strengths they have, right? So I'm like, this group, you guys are super strong and super powerful. We got to work on your flexibility just to kind of balance you out. And this group, you guys are super flexible. Your lines look great in your shoulders. We got to work a little bit on your strength to kind of balance you out. So there's a way to kind of frame that in terms of like a positive thing you have, not a negative thing you're lacking, which is really important. But then also, if you put them in a group side by side, they're not isolated. Like poor Susie in the corner is not like, the only one doing flexibility for her shoulders. So that'd be one, is try to again, learn a lot outside of the gym of what things you can do for each kind of half side to side there. Not everyone's going to be a perfect mold, but most people fall into one or the other generally. Two is this is when there's a huge value for taking one time per year to screen your athletes and try to get just like, I'm talking like very basic shoulder screens and hip screens and some wrist flexibility and some strength screens, like very, very easy. You could knock them out in like one day for the whole team, right? Like would not be that complicated. If you want to go crazy and do the full screen that I have on the medical side, like go nuts. But I think for most people, they can knock out like 4 or 5 screens and know a lot about the athletes. And based on that, you can write specific programs for them to do before practice or on a lighter day. So like I talked about when we break up our practices, we have one day that's a light day. We try to get 15 to 20 minutes of prehab. Everybody in their binder has a list in their front that from a screening session that I did the year before or the half year before, and they kind of knock that out a couple times when we're doing a light day. So it's a way for everyone to get their prehab, but it's specific for what they need. And then there's also the option for them to do that at home if there's something they want to work on or something else of that nature. That's another option. If they can come before practice, not all kids can. Some kids do, some kids don't. There's another option for that as well. So there's like screening can go a long way because in my experience from working with a lot of gymnasts, I find that like sometimes you think it's 30 things and it's actually 2 things, right? There's actually 2 things. It's just the lat muscle and it's just some strength, if some upper back flexibility they need. They don't need the 47 different YouTube drills that we gave them before. And same thing with strength issues. Like, it's just like, oh, your hamstrings and your glutes are just not nearly as strong as your quads. Let's just hammer those away for a little bit longer and really focus on those things. So I would go with screening. And then I think that when I program strength, I'm always giving a set and a rep range to work with. So this is common in the strength world for people to do is like, you write like, okay, we're doing 4 sets, but I want you to do somewhere between 8 to 12 repetitions. You don't give them a hard number to go at. So the kids that are crushing that exercise and can do more, do 12. The kids that are dying and their form's falling apart by 6, they just do 2 more quality ones and they don't feel like they're weaker. They don't feel like they're not good enough. They don't feel, it's like, oh, this is just an exercise that I struggle with. I can do my 8. And like Dave said, 8 is okay. So I feel good about myself. Then you have, somebody else who's like, yep, no problem. Can get the else 12. So they get a little bit more in or more lesson, but I also give them options for the exercise. Like here, the middle thing that I really want everyone to do well is a pull-up, right? But here are some things that like an L hold. Let's go an L hold. I want everyone to do an L hold as a perfect gold standard. That's what we're trying to do, right? An L hold and a leg lift. But if you can't really do that, just bend one leg and do 10 seconds on each bent leg, and we can develop you a little bit more. If you can do that, let's have you go up to a V, right? And sometimes this gets a little bit weird because there are some kids who are super talented and some kids that aren't, and it gets a little awkward. But I think, again, programming and like giving them sheets to do and they kind of go about it with their team and we're monitoring them is better than everyone staring at the whole group and someone feels singled out. So I'll give somebody exercises like push-ups are a great example too. Like I really am not a fan of knee push-ups because I think a lot of people arch their back a ton, but we use different elevations of blocks to make it harder or less, right? So if you go straight to the ground, that's the ideal version. If you can't do that with 8 great reps, let's put you up on a trapezoid so you're slightly more angled. But if you're really struggling, you're coming back from some sort of injury and you've been out for a while, let's just go on a higher block. And as long as you get 4 sets of 8 push-ups, that's cool. I just want you to put it to the one that has the best, highest quality. Next week, write in your binder what block you used and just tick down 6 inches. Next week, tip down a little more. So we do a lot of that as well. So I guess between separating them in the groups, separating them from screens, and then also giving them a few options to work with and a few set and rep ranges to work with, about like 8 to 12-ish. I think that will help.
Okay, Carla.
I have a question when it comes to recovery.
Yeah.
I guess it can be for any athlete, but let's say like they've been injured and they're just getting back and they're starting like full routines and they're really, starting to, do skills, but they're really sore. Is there any type of, we've done the baths, that kind of stuff. Is there any type of, I don't know, like a shake or anything like that would help with recovery?
Yeah. So I'm going to, again, go with the evidence on this one and kind of give you there's things that are clearly proven in research to make you not be as sore and kind of help you recover more. And there are things that are a little bit more on the marketing side. And this is trust me, I use the vibrating foam rollers we have, at our clinic, and we use foam rolling and stretching and ice baths and all that kind of stuff. Cold water soaks and also compression garments. And there's like some things that the research is supportive of, and there's some things that are just not quite there, and marketing has gotten a hold of them. So the 4 things in order that make the most impact on recovery is time, right? Proper periodization and proper intervals between your workouts that are like the same muscle groups, which I'm sure you have that knocked out. Sleep, 8 to 10 hours of high quality sleep is by far and away super important to recover well. And so I'm more having conversations about like, how many TikTok videos do you really need to watch before you go to bed? Like, come on, can we get like maybe a half hour instead of an hour and a half or 2 hours? Like, can we plan our school a little bit better so we're not doing a report till 2 a.m? Like some of those conversations, I'm having more conversations about scheduling their life and not getting on social media than I am about like having a bed routine and like making sure you have a nice warm shower so you go to bed faster. Like that's a big one. Having blue light in your eyes makes it so you don't fall asleep for like an hour when you go, like you go to sleep, but your hypothalamus and your other areas of your brain don't shut down. So you lose like 45 minutes of high quality sleep. So for athletes that do have to work in a computer, I tell them to do their computer work on their schoolwork as soon as they get home, and then finish with their book work or finish with their like written assignments, because that helps them go to sleep faster. I tell them that they're by themselves and no one's going to see them if they wear orange glasses that are blue light blocking. So don't worry about it. It's totally fine. That helps me go to sleep much faster. So we're teaching them little strategies like that. 3 is by far and away fuel, like proper fuel, right? Like having enough calories, having the right types of calories, having enough water, having, drinking throughout the day, eating throughout the day, saving the fun foods for the weekend maybe, and not putting those like, right before and after practice. And I think so far outside my lane to give that advice, but there's so many good people that can tactfully deliver that conversation. And thankfully people like Carrie Blair and Christina Anderson and Josh and Jamie Shear, like they have great social media content that the kids can just look up their own and kind of learn about that kind of stuff. So nutrition and fuel, and then outside stress management is actually super indicative of who recovers faster. There's some massively geeky studies that the people who have more life stress don't recover as fast from physical training loads. So kids that are very stressed out with school or with timelines or with boys and girls and dating or whatever, I don't know, but they don't recover as faster as athletes that are I feel like their life is in a good balance. So some of that's out of your control. Some of that is more of like the art of coaching, of teaching them how to kind of process and deal with that. Some of that is referring to a mental health coach or a sports psychologist or someone to help them kind of get some of those frustrations away. So those are the 4 things that research clearly shows are the best, most important. And if you don't have those things really, really well, none of the vibration, none of the bath things, none of the compression is going to work, right? If you're wearing Normatex and using a vibrating Theragun, but you're sleeping 5 hours and eating like, junk before practice and after practice, you're not drinking enough water and your life's in chaos. Good luck, right? So if you have those 4 things optimized, which I think many people have work to do there, the next things that research does show that are helpful are dynamic compression. So that's what like Normatec boots are. So the inflating and deflating does actually help push some of the metabolites away from your legs, which causes a lot of that soreness, or the micro trauma causes the soreness. So Dr. Sands was the head of the recovery center at the OTC, and he wrote some great book chapters, did studies that does actually help. Most people don't have $5,000 to spend on an Normatec. The next best thing is static compression. So wearing leggings or the tighter kind of compression garments before you go to bed is not the best situation, but it does, again, help to kind of clear some of that out. I think Skins is the most popular brand that kind of has like a fitted you can wear. So a lot of athletes will wear like calf or quad sleeves when they're like from the time they get home from the gym to when they go to bed. Some can wear them overnight, but I don't want to give that advice out because I'm not clear on the research there. Static compression is then a good thing to do that. And then next after that comes like the very, icing on the cake kind of stuff, which is like, foam rolling and heat and stretching and ice bath, contrast bath, stuff like that. Foam rolling does help reduce the perceived DOMS or perceived soreness. So maybe a nice little foam rolling session at the end of practice when they go home. Static stretching, or not static stretching, active recovery or movement is good. So if they're like cripplingly sore on a Wednesday, they have a lighter day the next day. If they can hop on a bike and do a nice easy 20-minute bike or go for a walk or something like that, and the movement does help facilitate some of that. And then lastly is like all the crazy stuff that, is like I said, the icing on the case, like vibrating massage guns or creams or supplements or all that kind of stuff. I'm usually far and away from recommending those things if the first 7 things aren't, consistently done and actually followed. So long answer, but I hope that clears up some of the noise.
No, I have a 15-year-old elite son, so 15, there's the word.
It's tough. It's tough, man. There's Instagram's got way more fun things than an ice bath. I'll tell you that.
Well, yeah, it's also, I think, our COVID times. I think kids right now, because we, in our gym and in my son, they're kind of somewhat going through injury to injury to injury just because they tried to come back. They're kids. They try to come back too fast.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll just kind of button up the entire thing here is that I've unfortunately treated probably like 60 more kids than I ever have in this last 6 months because of COVID. And so like everyone on this call clearly cares about learning more and doing the right thing. But like there is just an inevitable patience we have to deal with that we took. I'm the number one proponent of a relative off season, like 4 to 6 weeks. And we took 6 for some people 6 months, but some people like 3 months, way too long. And like everybody got deconditioned. You could have been doing the most amazing Zoom workouts at your house, but it is still 20 to 30% of the training load that gymnastics basics even puts on your body. So like, it's just, I don't think anybody, including myself, really appreciated how long it was going to take to get back to full conditioning and full basics and full strength and full routines and stuff. And so I think all of us in here need to maybe realize that a lot of the things we're dealing with, flexibility, frustrations, or injuries, or all that kind of stuff, or just mental stress and headaches. Like, I think a lot of us are just kind of swimming through the reality of how hard this year has been. And I think we need to kind of not judge ourselves too hard, or judge the kids too hard, or have the kids judge themselves too hard about like how hard it is to get back to do this kind of stuff. And I'm not going to go into it, but like I had some gyms that I was working with that were like doing a mock meet in September, October. And I'm like, bro, what are you doing right now? Like, this is insanity. And so like, even if you didn't compete at all and you're just trying to get your skills back, like the amount of time it takes to get back to hard gymnastics is 2 to 3 times the amount of time you were off. So if you were off for 2 months, it takes 4-ish months to get back to just basic physical conditioning, to do all your hard training load. And then on top of that, you have the skills, the mental stuff, the masks, the cleaning protocols, the COVID protocols. You got to take 2 weeks off. Like, you just riding a roller coaster this year. So I think a lot of people I talk to, I'm just like, just realize that a lot of this is not your fault and that you're doing the best you can, and don't be so hard on yourself. So there's a part of that too as well. I got through 2 hours there. I think we got most of the questions answered. If we did not, I am so sorry. But I think we'll probably do another one of these pretty soon. And I think if they're helpful, if people like them, definitely do us a favor and like I said, screenshot a couple of these and toss them up on social media. If you found it valuable, the more exposure we can get to the YouTube we put up tomorrow, the better. Again, if you guys want to take the free coaches course, I think we've had like 1,500 people sign up this week, which is mind blowing to me. But shiftmovementscience.com/free coaches is just like a 5-module, flexibility, strength, culture, basics, shaping. What's the other one? Injuries, prehab, stuff like that. So yeah, hope that you guys enjoy this. I hope everyone's doing well in this crazy COVID year, and I will hopefully talk to you guys soon. But Becky, Sarah, Taylor, everybody, thank you.